The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lions, how's it going?
Tired.
Tired of
You. No.
yeah. I've gotten that note
you.
before.
Yeah. No. I've had like maybe like a couple weeks of not great sleep. For like a variety of reasons. It's just like a bunch of bad coincidences. I knew it was a problem when like if I'm overtired, my eyes twitch. And I realized that I had gone a full week without one day that didn't happen. I was like, I think I might be tired. This is probably
sleep.
good. Yeah. And I said, it's not like one problem. Like there's stupid street racers that go by near my house. So like sometimes that's the noise that disturbs me, or like something with my kids, or something like it was too hot or too cold, right? It's just been a series of unfortunate events.
So did you ever hear this? This deals a lot with video games. So my notes for audiovisual, one of my notes on audio is, did you ever, I heard recently on like how or why white noise machines work.
Okay. So I will let you explain this. And this is going to sound like a cop out. I have looked into this more than once because my kids use white noise machines because they benefit from it tremendously. But it's one of those things that like it instantly became trivia. Like once I knew that it would help them sleep better, I understood it and then never had to apply that knowledge again. And it just leaked out of my ears. So the answer to the question, do you know why white noise machines work, is no, but yes, I used to.
So you did.
I knew. Yes.
Yes. So apparently is that what our brains are really, really good at picking up is not necessarily delta in volume of noise, but delta in number of noises, right? So if you go from hearing no noises to one noise, or one noise to two noises, your brain picks up on that, right? And it says, wake up, because there was no noise, and now I heard a twig snapping, or a bear roaring, or a bear slowly eating you, right?
Oh God, is that what that noise was?
I heard nom 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 nom. Anyways, so your brain's really good at that, but like it's really, really bad at going from hearing like 100 to 101 noises, which is why like if you're in a crowded subway station and there's a whole bunch of people talking, and then suddenly one more person starts talking, you're never going to notice that, right? So what a white noise does is it gives you 1,000 noises. So what it's doing is it's hitting noises on all sorts of different frequencies. So it is the equivalent of being like in a crowded room. So then all of a sudden, if there is now 1,001 noises, your brain is less likely to key into that thing and pull it out. Now, if it's substantially louder, then all of a sudden it's like, well, there's 1,000 noises at this level and then one big noise that I can now hone in on. But that's kind of why it disrupts that. I say that to say that maybe that'd help with the street racer one of those,
Yeah. No, I think that's, especially now that my kids are a little older and I'm less worried about like, well, what if I don't hear when they're crying or there's a problem, right? So like that is maybe worth considering, because I can't throw a bunch of thumbtacks out onto the highway, which is what I actually want to do. Right. So I need a different solution. I do.
To be fair, you don't even need thumbtacks. You can just throw some of your D4s out, because as far as I know, stepping on those in the middle of the night, I'm pretty sure they can puncture tires.
Yeah, well, I mean, especially if you hit one at 120 miles an hour, it probably cause some issues. I think if not directly related, like a close cousin to like the white noise, like delta in number of noises, is brains really like to complete patterns, which is why if you are sitting in a room where 10 people are talking, you can tune that out and sit there and read your book or do your crossword puzzle or whatever. If you're sitting in a room where one person is on a phone call, it's mind-bogglingly frustrating because you can only hear half the conversation. So your brain is trying to complete the pattern and like answer the person right? Because it thinks there should be other noise happening, and that noise is happening. You just can't hear it, which I hate to say that because that almost means that those assholes who walk around in public with their phone on speaker are like kind of doing you a favor.
Yeah, I could see that. And also too, though, I could see your brain, it's kind of like in video games, to say brought back to video games, in video games, when like a game glitches, especially like a Bethesda game, where all of a sudden an NPC is like, hey, this person is trying to talk to me, I should be talking to them, and you're like, I'm not though, and it's like, hey man, you want a quest? I don't want the quest. Okay, then that's cool. Hey man, you want a quest? Still, dude, still no, man. Just trying to talk to this innkeep, trying to, hey man, like that. So I. Because it's like a coding error, but I think that your brain has that same coding where it's like, this person's trying to talk to you. It's like, no, they're not brain. They're just talking very loudly and rudely near me, and they're talking to no one, but evolutionarily your brain hasn't gotten there, right? So your brain's like, look, man, there's nobody talking and there's one person near you that's talking half of a conversation. They are clearly talking to you. No, brain, they're not talking to me. No, dude, they're talking to you. So
they gotta be.
So basically, if you are speaking in a quiet area on your phone, you are the Bethesda glitch of phone conversations, and shame on you.
Shame on you. You're better than that random audience foil. So what is this? This is the science. Oh, did you like my science names for, I was trying to do do you want witty science, which is I feel like it's forcing the pun a little more, or science with wit. I kind of like science with wit because it's a little more subtle.
Yeah. No, I like science with wit. Yeah. I can get on board with that. I feel like eventually that's just going to happen
accidentally. We're going to record a whole science education podcast and completely forget what we were supposed to be doing.
I mean, I am super on board with it, man. We'll just we'll shoot one, a random weekend, and then we'll go from there. Or it could be witty science,
Yeah. I just want to make sure people, because the problem with a cutesy name is it makes it a little bit less discoverable, but it once you know what's going on, it makes it more obvious, right? So if wit, WITT, is a common enough misspelling of wit, this person is witty, then maybe Google would shove people our way by accident. They search for the wrong spelling, and then it's no, you actually meant this other thing, this cool new podcast. I don't know, one day. Should we probably talk about some video games though?
I mean, maybe eventually, but
if you want to support George's dreams of having a science podcast, you can subscribe to our video game podcast that you're already listening to and waiting for it to actually start.
Which it will. It definitely will at some point.
No, eventually, probably. If you want to make sure other people can find the show, ratings and reviews are fine, but I think just find an episode that covers a game you love and send it off to somebody so that they know where to jump in. If you can't find that episode because we haven't yet covered that game you love, send us a little message. Social media is for losers now, so go onto the feedback form on the website. Links for all this stuff in the show notes. That's the easiest way to reach out to us. We do have a small, humble but beautiful Discord community. You can request stuff in there as well. Most of the games we play now are just straight listener requests, which I think has been super cool. So come and ask for the things you want us to play. If you want to go crazy above and beyond, you can support us on our Patreon. Everybody who supports at any level gets the after show, which is just more witty science and sometimes video games and stuff.
Yep.
People who support us at a high enough tier.
A lot of philosophy.
It's a lot of philosophy and TTRPGs.
Yeah.
A lot of philosophy and TTRPGs. Yeah. Yep. Which are both good topics that we could also maybe do other spin-off shows about. There's going to be a whole Nostalgia Goggles verse of podcasts. But if you want to get your name shouted out on the show and you support us at one of those levels, we will shout you out on the show. So first, I need to thank our 8-bit classics, Kevin, John, Jason, Yarno, and Jacob, and our 16-bit hero, Michael.
And if you pay us $1,000, we will write a rock opera in your honor.
Whoa.
Yeah.
We may be getting the short end of the deal on that.
I didn't say it'd be good.
Yeah.
I mean, it will be our best effort.
All right. I mean, yes, we will do this because this is a legally binding contract.
Yeah, obviously.
So we have a mailbag question from one of our listeners. This one came in actually through that very self-same Discord. And I'm going to read this in its entirety because I think it has a funny conclusion. Have you guys been able to steer your children towards the classic video games? For a while, I was doing a good job and having my kids play 2D Marios and other classics, but now it seems like I'm losing them to Roblox and other junk they have on their phones. Phones. They'd rather play with touchscreens than proper controllers. Where did I go wrong? At least they're not into Fortnite.
Could be worse. Could be Fortnite. Yeah. So do you want to?
Yeah. Unfortunately, my kids play very little video games, partially because their age and partially for other reasons. But that will eventually change. When we do play games together, it's usually modern additions in classic series. So, Super Mario Galaxy, right? Played a little bit of Odyssey, right? Games that are like easy for them to kind of be a player to and sort of participate, and it's a little bit more of a thing, but like doesn't require them to have a very sophisticated games literacy because they don't play a lot of games. I think at some point, if I still have functioning instruments, I'd like to see how they feel about like Rock Band or DDR, right? Which aren't really like retro games, but I think that's a way to like start to get them to understand some of like gaming culture, gaming literacy, right? And then eventually be like, now beat Castlevania in one life, right? So like we gotta be, because they have this really slow entry into gaming. I think it's gonna have to be pretty gentle. And by the time we get there, those games may be so old that they're just like, lol, no. But as long as they have like decent taste in games, then it's okay if they don't play every classic. But obviously, I haven't yet given up on that fight, but we'll see how the war goes. You, I think, have had a little bit more success.
Yeah. So no, my kids aren't animals. They play the classics. So one, they don't. To be fair, though, I think that judging my guess by the way this question was framed, is that they probably have older kids. Right? Because they have phones, right? So I'm not dealing with that because I am still in the cross section of time where I walk on water and am a superhero, so like I have said these games are good and people who are good at games are good at these games. So therefore they are like, I want to be good at games. And I'm like, okay, then get good at games.
I want to be the guy.
So, I know that, to your point, they definitely play Yoshi, they play Mario on the Switch, and that's kind of like their go-to because the Switch is very available. But I have had them play some Link to the Past, some Super Mario Brothers 3, and Castlevania. So yeah, and it was nice though for Castlevania because we played a little bit of it, and so Teddy would take a turn, then Lizzie would take a turn, then I would take a turn, and so I was effectively playing the game always on one life because
right.
Teddy would play and die, then Lizzie would play and die, and then I had to clear the level, so it was an interesting experience. And then the main difference was that they were both just like right over my shoulders watching me and like excited, cheering me on. So I was like, I can't make a mistake because they have to think that I'm perfect at this, So I beat levels 1, 2, and 3 without dying once. And
Dang.
I was like, yeah, and then I was like, oh, hey guys, it's time for lunch. We should probably stop because I'm like, I could see I was I actually got up to the 4th boss.
The Frankenstein.
The Frankenstein.
I hate that one.
He done got me. But it was funny too because I remember at one point Teddy said, "I smashed in there." He said, "How do you get health left? How do you get health back?" And I was like, "Oh, well, here, I'll show you." I smash a wall, and I'm like, "See that? That is mysterious dungeon wall chicken." And if you eat mysterious roasted dungeon wall chicken, then you get health.
In video games only.
Yes, dude. Unlike in Streets of Rage, where if you find chicken in a garbage can, that is not gonna heal you. Best case scenario, it does nothing.
I just had reason to recount the box of cereal in the garbage story to someone. I feel like the thing that's amazing about that story is if you were there, right? Like we were both there when that happened, and it was like, oh wow, this is very shocking and was handled in a surprisingly uncouth way, which is what made it so funny, right? But there's nothing about it that isn't like retellable, right? And so I've found myself retelling that story because I'm just like, no, I think this is on the right side of you didn't have to be there. Like it's just funny because it's absurd.
Would you like to retell it for our audience now?
I would. Would you? Do you want to deliver your own lines? Like I can set up framing device.
Yeah, you can frame it, but you can't do the whole lead in and then just leave the audience hanging.
Yeah,
unless we did it in the after show, and then they have to pay $1 to come.
No, this is the quality of stuff you get in the after show, but you're gonna get it now. It's a little taste. So we were both working at Blockbuster, and there was a grocery store right nearby. And
if that doesn't date the story,
right? We were both working at Netflix.
The brick and mortar store. We were both working at the 8-track player selling place, and
we were in the Victrola repair shop. So there was a grocery store nearby, and so we would go over there to like get, instead of eating out at restaurants all the time because we were in graduate school, it was like, oh, we can just buy groceries and then eat those, and it's cheaper than like buying a meal out, right? And so you would often get entire boxes of store brand cereal, which, side note to the side note, I believe gave you iron poisoning at one point.
It did. No, I wasn't allowed to give blood because I was just eating full blown bags of cereal, and I remember being like, I'm tired. And
because your blood is metal.
Yeah, I wanted to become Metal Mario, but from the inside out.
This isn't working. So you had gotten, I don't know, 85% of the way through this box of cereal. And you're just like, I've seen it. I understand what this box of cereal is about. And there was
interestingly, the way I remember that going was that I had grown frustrated with myself with the volume of cereal I was eating, and so I had eaten about 75% of it. And so like I was like, I'm going to eat half of this and I'm going to be done eating it. And then I went back and ate more of it. And then out of frustration with myself, threw the thing into the garbage because I'm like, no, I'm not eating any more of this. And throwing it into the garbage and I'm done, So yes, that is why.
So, counter, right? Big long counter with all the cash registers. And at the end was like a 50-gallon garbage pail, not the kind you normally see indoors, like the kind you drag out to the curb for the garbage man, right? So big old garbage can that was mostly full. And so when you rage through your box of cereal, it is basically just sitting right there at the top, right? Let's say roughly at eye height for like a 10-year-old. Hypothetically. So a 10-year-old and his mother walks up to the counter, and while I think I was checking her out, I was ringing her up, right? The 10-year-old wanders over because he's bored, and he wanders over to the garbage, which is where you go in a place full of movies and video games and candy. you go over to the garbage pail, and he lifts the box of cereal out and, cool as you please, turns to the room in general and says, "Can I have this?"
And then I remember at that point being completely dumbfounded. I said, "Out of the garbage? You put that back?" It's not my child.
It was not. We did not know this woman. Yeah.
Nope. Yeah. And at that point, I remember at least my blood running cold and being like, I might get fired for this.
No. I think it's not. It would have been a hill worth dying on, though.
Very true. Very true. But yes. So, that is what happens when you eat. When you eat food out of the garbage. In video games, it gives you health. In real life, it may make you sick or get you yelled at by a random by a random minimum wage worker in a Blockbuster.
And I think if I recall correctly, the cherry on that sundae was, as you did the slow motion turn to camera to look over at the mother who's at the opposite end of the counter with me. I believe she like attaboyed you.
Yeah. Yeah, she was entirely okay with it. I mean, but okay. So then you see him start to take the food out of the garbage. I'd like to make a persuasion check. You rolled a 1 at advantage. You rolled a 20. Yay! So you got them to stop, and the mom's not mad at you, but absolutely had every right to be. And it's like, okay, I'll take it.
Yeah. No. Okay. Next scene. Quick.
Yeah. Quick. Move along. So now we go into what are you playing and why should I care?
So I'm playing like so many games. And this is actually going to be related to the larger topic I want to talk about if we have time for it, which is you got me on to realize something about myself, which is I like when a game ends. So I also enjoy like roguelites and puzzle games and stuff and arcadey games sometimes, but generally I lean toward more like narrative complete packages that have a defined start and finish. And you, again, generally lean toward games that you can pick up and play for 2 hours or 2 weeks or 2 years, or right. And any amount of break in between would be fine. Whereas like with a narrative experience, that's weirder. It's weirder to take a break from a book for 6 months and then be like, wait, what was going on? Why do I care about these characters? So I actually reached out to the community and was like, give me short games to play, and not short games like Vampire Survivor that are like just an endless loop, right? Or basically an arcade game that's a score chaser. I want short narrative games that have a defined ending, something like a short hike. And so I got a ton of recommendations. I'm going to throw links for all these in the show notes. I've not yet played most of these, so I cannot speak to their quality. But I have played some of these. And recently I played several actually on stream because I was like, oh, I want to play a few of these before I talk to George about it. But some short games that came up that were recommended that I think you will probably agree are super good are like Journey and Untitled Goose Game, right? Like games that can be very serious or very silly, right? But that have like a clear start and finish, and you may never play that game again. And that's maybe fine, but like it still is worth playing, even though you pay full price, but you only get this like the time slice isn't big. It's like you want to go for a big impact slice. So the two that I played just a couple nights ago, one of them, I'm gonna hang on. It's The One Who Pulls Out the Sword Will Be Crowned King. And so this game is it's like a simple 3D kind of like low textures, right? It looks very indie, and there's a sword and a stone. Click on it with your mouse, and then you lift it out of the stone. Except lifting it out of the stone takes like 10 real minutes. And in that whole time, you can't let go of the mouse button. And if you move the cursor off of the sword, it falls back in. So
interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's silly. I think it's actually free. It's a joke, right? But it's like, you have to decide, I am willing to put in what is physically rather laborious to like hold your hand, and you have to move it, to pull the sword out and keep resetting the mouse. And then there's like a silly little ending where you go and they crown you king, and you get married to the princess, and it's you immediately behead the king. Like he gives you his crown and then he is immediately so it's like, it's very silly and it's kind of fun. Would a person ever play that game a second time? Probably not, right? It's mostly to just say like, not just I saw it and I know what the twist is, but like I proved to myself I could do the thing, right? Like I could beat the challenge essentially. The other one I played is this game called Franken, which is if you took someone who played like way too much Final Fantasy IV, way too much Earthbound, way too much Undertale, way too much Dragon Quest, and said, hey, now write a story that like a 13-year-old who thinks he's hilarious would write, and then made it into a game, you would get Franken, right? And I don't say any of that to crap on it. It's the artwork is actually surprisingly detailed for what it is. The music is excellent. I think either this person got really great music, or maybe they got like open source, like Creative Commons music. But it's surprisingly good music. And the story and the jokes in it are just dumb as hell, but they're dumb in a way that makes you feel like you're part of the club, right? Because it's a lot of like, oh, that's a reference to Dragon Quest. Oh, that's a reference to Final Fantasy. Oh, okay. Like it's holding up a mirror and laughing at yourself. Like, look at how seriously we take all of these ridiculous games. But it's not because we're saying we shouldn't take these games seriously. It's just to like have a little laugh, right? About the amount of ourselves we emotionally pour into some of these stories.
You know, that's kind of like, I forget the exact name of it, but it's like Attack on Titan Kids or something like that.
Oh yeah, it's like a Attack on Titan High or whatever.
Yeah,
Yes.
Attack on Titan High. Yeah. Where it's just like Attack on Titan is very, very super, very serious. It's a serious show. It's got some serious stuff going on, right? And then that one's it's just all silly, and it's making fun of the original show, but not like in a this show is dumb and you should feel dumb for liking it. It's like, no, if you love that show, then you also love like the fact that Aaron Yeager will stop at nothing to avenge his lunch getting eaten, you know, and and that kind of weird stuff.
Yeah, the because I haven't seen that, but I do know what you're talking about. But the example I always think of is One Punch Man. You don't watch One Punch Man because you think Dragon Ball is stupid. You watch One Punch Man because you think Dragon Ball is awesome, right? But One Punch Man, which is just making fun of Dragon Ball, is also awesome, right? So it's like you can enjoy both of those things. You can take something silly seriously, and you can enjoy admitting that it's kind of silly and not that important, right? It can be serious without being important. And so this game is just, it's that, right? Like it's dumb on purpose. It's dumb in a way that's very smart and well executed. And not every game that's in this list is like that. A lot of indie games that are like small contained experiences are horror games. I don't know why. There's just a lot of them. Some of them are, parodies. Some of them are like very experimental. There's a game on here that I can't decide if I want to actually play it or not. I've heard it's very interesting, but it's called Milk Inside a Bag of Milk Inside a Bag of Milk. And it's like a horror story that's about like existential dread or something. I'm kind of on the fence about it because I'm always worried indie horror games are going to lean into like crap popping out at me, which I don't love. But I can recommend Franken, and I can recommend The One Who Pulls Out the Sword Will Be Crowned King because they're both free. So like a lot of these short indie games are no money. So if you're willing to put in 15 minutes to 90 minutes, like I think it's worth it. And that's what I want to talk about is the broader topic once we get there.
Did I ever tell you something that I thought you would get? I might have shared this with you, but something that I think you would 100% resonate with, which is that I'm not a huge fan of jump scares either. But you hate them. Like it's kind of like you don't like having your feet wet in your shoes, but like I have zero tolerance for it.
Yes.
It's that, right?
Yeah, zero tolerance for jump scares. I've come very close to hitting people.
You have hit somebody. You hit.
And he deserved it because he lied to me.
Sorry, you hit name redacted.
No, he. I'll just answer it. It's so funny. No, I hit the Atlanta Falcons because they said, "Hey, come look at this thing," and I said, "This looks like one of those things that's a jump scare on like E-Bombs World or Newgrounds or whatever." And they said, "No, it's not." And I said, "The Atlanta Falcons, don't do this. If this is a jump scare, I will punch you." And then the Atlanta Falcons played the video and it was a jump scare and I punched the Atlanta Falcons in their stupid chest.
So really all you were doing was fulfilling the contract that you had agreed upon with the Atlanta Falcons.
Yes.
So yeah, and that's fair.
I feel like I was totally in the right. And to the Atlanta Falcons' credit, they did not get mad at me. Like they apparently thought this was a worthwhile exchange of goods and services. So whatever.
Whatever they're into. Anyways, I say all of that to say I also don't like jump scares, but I saw a comedian that said jump scares aren't horror. They're just cheap. He goes like, that would be like me going into the audience and tickling people and saying, "Oh, you laughed, you got your money's worth."
Yes. Yeah. No, 100%. And so it's harder to tell with, small indie games because it's like, it's harder to find reviews. If it's a horror game, people usually don't want to give up the story or, give up the twist because that's the point in those cases, which means it's even harder to kind of unveil the truth. But I do. I will be curious when we get there to like kind of pick this apart with our like very different approach to what we consider like snackable gaming or like smaller gaming experiences that we think are worthwhile. Because I think we have some overlap, but I think we have a bunch of differences as well. So before we get to that, what are you playing? Why should I care?
So I am playing, as far as what I'm playing from a video game standpoint, I started replaying Dead Cells because you turned me on to the fact that there was going to be some, they were going to basically do Castlevania DLC.
Yeah, I think it's literally called Return to Castlevania. It has official support from Konami.
Right. So I was like, oh yeah, I want to do that. And then I downloaded it and it was like, oh no, it's coming out in like 3 months. I was like, oh, but... And again, I was like, oh, I'll just play a little bit. And then the thing was that I actually, my PS5 died, so I got a new PS5, and I didn't do the cloud save, so like,
yeah.
But actually, it's fine though, because I actually, and this kind of goes back to like the snackable game, is that I'm kind of okay with that because now I'm not picking it up having already done 5 different runs, and I just started it again from scratch,
Oh,
it's kind of fun.
And games like that usually have slightly different things on your first few runs to like help ease you into it. So there are like some benefits to them thinking you're new.
There are some benefits because one, you don't unlock trash weapons that, you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't unlocked that. And also two is that it's nice because it's a roguelike, I'm better at it. So, I got, as opposed to dying on the first level or two, I'm getting cells way faster and unlocking stuff faster because I'm just better at the game. So that was fun. I am still playing Cyberpunk. I've invested skills into my character such that they are basically the Wolverine. Like they regenerate health. And I put a lot of points into that being my thing. So, at one point I was on a mission and the person was like, all right, we got to sneak in. If we go in guns blazing, it's suicide. And I said, well, let's stress test that. And so
challenge accepted.
I went in guns blazing and it was not suicide because people just could not put bullets in me faster than I could regenerate them out, which does kind of make sense because, I have a bunch of cyber augmentations, but she lied. It was totally beatable going in guns blazing.
So you're playing RoboCop, like
kinda.
You go into the den of scum and villainy, and they're like, it's RoboCop, get him, and then they unload their clips as you continue to terrifyingly march toward them.
Pretty much, yeah. And some bullets bounce off, some of them land in me, but I just keep on trucking. So. So yes, that's still been kind of fun. There are definitely some parts in the game though where one the way the cars drive is not never ever drive a car. Just don't do it. Either fast travel or walk. Don't drive a car.
Is it like Grand Theft Auto style driving?
Never played Grand Theft Auto. So.
Okay, so Grand Theft Auto is if you looked at someone else playing it, you would say, "Oh, this game has a lot of shooting. It's a shooter." No. Oh, but this game has a lot of driving, so it's like a driving game. No, it's not. It's not either of those things. And it's like, how is it not those things? How indeed, right? Like it's weird because the driving it's not bad. It's not driving. It's not like Gran Turismo, right? And the shooting is not Halo or Doom. It's Grand Theft Auto, right? There's there's a very specific feel to those systems, and I would not be surprised if the Cyberpunk driving probably feels kind of like that.
It might. I just don't care for it because of two reasons. One is that it's just I don't find a lot of joy in it. But also two is that a lot of the times when you're driving around, you're driving because you're like the passenger and somebody else is driving because they need to dump exposition on you. And it
sounds like Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah. And the exposition dumps are fine, but the way the voice lines trigger is awkward. So sometimes there will be a long awkward pause when there shouldn't be, and sometimes they'll talk over each other when they shouldn't. So it's just not great. It's not terrible. It's not like experience ruining, but whenever they're like, hey, we need to go to point A, get in, I'm like, do I have to? And I think they know that because about half of the time there's an option of I'll meet you there, and I will always meet them there.
I'll take the bus.
Yeah, I got some other stuff, but I did have one experience, and then there's the other stuff I'm playing that I'll touch on because I think it's interesting. But the one amazing experience I did have that I love these types of emergent experiences, which was so you can call people and it actually like they talk to you in your head because you have like a implant. And it's kind of cool because in the game people's eyes will turn red, to let you know that they're like on the phone,
Creepy.
Yeah. So and like when they're scrolling through data they turn blue, so like you can like see when people are not looking at you, they're looking at something else. But anyway, so basically somebody was on the phone with me and they're like, "Hey V, we need you to handle a job because of this, that." And as they're talking to me, I walk past a gang of street toughs and I'm like, "Oh, while this person is dumping exposition on me, I can just murder these street toughs, which will give me something to do. I'll make some eddies and they'll continue."
You fidgeted by murdering strangers?
Yes, murder is my fidget spinner. So I start doing that, and then basically, so right when I turn and I start shooting, he goes, "Got a Delta, call you back." And then it stops the call, right? So they do that so you don't miss exposition, right? And then when I was done, the call came back. Was what happened? The way it felt, though, was literally I walked in, they're like, "Hey, V, we need you for a job." Hang on 1 second. Blam, 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 blam. All right, what's up? Because like the phone call picked right back up the minute the last person dropped, So it's like, yeah, I'm sorry. What was that? It's like the blood's still drying on me, So it was hilarious. Like, I don't know. It was just a blast.
It feels like this game, based on the way you've described it and what I've seen from other people, the world is as serious as you decide it is.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you're a superhero in a cartoon universe, like the game sort of accommodates that. And if it's super dark and gritty and it makes you reflect on, humanity's relationship with machines and its creations and what is technology doing to society, you can do that too, right?
Yep. Yeah, and actually one of the things that they do that I think is fascinating is that they have cyber psychos in the game, right? And so, yeah.
Okay, maybe it is just silly.
No, so cyber psychos are actually, they treat them very seriously. They are people who have gotten so many implants put into them that they undergo cyber psychosis and lose their mind, And so like all of the different ways, because whenever you go and investigate a cyber psycho, you have to typically you have to kill them, right? And then you get information on, who they were. And some of them are dealing with PTSD. Some of them are, like all these different reasons for why they lose their minds, right? What that tacitly does, though? Prevents you from just going around murdering everybody, which you could probably do. If you do that, just like in Grand Theft Auto, your wanted level goes up and all this sort of stuff. But the main thing I tested it at one point to see what happens if I just kill a random person, right? And my wanted level went up a little bit, but then it dropped off. I'm like, okay, this is kind of similar to a mugging, basically, But I say all that to say that the reason why I haven't gone full ham and just lost, killed a whole bunch of people in the middle of, downtown Night City is because I've realized I'm like, that would make me the cyber psycho. And then they will come in and they will kill me. And so they've kind of narratively given you a reason for it's just yeah, man, if you want to go crazy and kill everyone, then do that. But narratively, you have gone crazy because you lost your mind because you are so powerful, And I'm like, that's kind of cool. It's kind of a cool way to dissuade that action,
Yeah. Yeah. I like the, this is what's on the other side of failed super soldier serum. Right. So don't turn into that because what happens. Someone like you shows up. It's almost got a Looper-esque quality.
Yeah. Yep. So the one other thing I wanted to share is the other game I did dabble a little bit in Fate. I got the core rules. I've been reading that. And we can talk about that another time for another day because I've only read a bit into it. But I have been playing a lot of D&D recently because I now have 3 different sessions going on. So a lot of, 2 of them I'm DMing, one of them I'm a player, but I say all that to say that, so when it's what am I playing? D&D. But the thing that I ran into recently was a change between 3.5 and 5.0, right? And I'm actually at the point now in my 5th edition journey where I'm starting, some of the 3.5 knowledge I still have rattling around in my head is starting to hang me up, because I've made a couple of fairly serious mistakes that I was like, well, this works like it did in 3.5. And I didn't realize that was what my brain was doing. I just assumed that I understood the rule, because Quicken spell works very differently in 5th edition than it did in 3.5, you know, so I was way more powerful than I should have been, you know. Because you can cast as a bonus action. Quicken spell takes a spell from an action to a bonus action, and you can get a bonus action in a round. So I was like, okay, so I can cast Fireball twice in one round because I cast one as my action and was my bonus action. But if you cast the spell as a bonus action, you can still take an action, but you cannot cast anything above a cantrip. And I missed that rule.
Yeah,
you know,
that's a big caveat.
Yeah,
for this exact reason, so you can't double Fireball.
Right, but in 3.5 you could double Fireball, but the cost of quickening a spell was way higher than it is now, so they dropped the cost and nerfed it a bit, right? Anyways, but the one thing that I realized I wanted to share with you right before we get into your topic, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it, is Polymorph. Do you remember the way Polymorph worked in 3.5?
I'm not sure that I do, and the reason is a lot of like YouTube short style, haha, look at how broken this thing is, are often related to like ways to exploit Polymorph, which are based on the 5.0 version of it. So I'm actually not sure that I do.
So the main difference, I'm sure there are a bunch of minor differences, but the main difference is that in 3.5, you got all of the physical stuff that the monster could do, right? Whatever it was you're polymorphing into. You also got strength, dex, and con, but you retained your intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, right? In 5th edition, you get all of their stats, including their mental abilities, right? So you now get their intelligence, wisdom, and charisma scores as well. But it says you maintain your alignment and personality. And I called BS. I'm like, no. How would that even work? Like, okay, so what you're telling me is that I am now a intelligence 6 barbarian, right? And I get polymorphed into an illithid, right? Now I'm not necessarily, evilly aligned, right? I don't automatically have all the illithid's philosophies, but I've now gone from having a 6 intelligence to a 20 intelligence. That would not change my overall personality or outlook on life, And then worse, right, is I was like, this spell has now become a horror show, because then, you know what happens? I go back, and I've been Flowers for Algernon, like, how can that not irreparably change who you are as a person, Like, if all of a sudden, like, you're just some hot punk street tough who's got like a wisdom of 8, to all of a sudden like being attuned and at one with the universe with a wisdom of 18, and then that is sundered from you at the end of the spell, like, going in and coming out of the spell is going to change who you are as a person.
Yeah. So for comedy reasons, I agree with you with no notes, because I think it would just be interesting to see like all of the terrible ways that would manifest in a person, right? Because you would definitely become addicted to that. Like,
oh yeah,
right. Like you as a wizard could become incredibly wealthy by polymorphing someone who has like some sort of thing they feel negative about themselves into something that doesn't have that what they perceive to be a deficiency, and then the spell wears off and now they're jonesing for it. They're like, I just want to feel that way again, right? So now polymorph becomes this like psychotic, like it's like psilocybin, right? Now, man, I just got to feel that way again. I got to feel connected to the universe. Raise my wisdom to 18. But I think there are two ways to handle it, and they are complete opposites. Either you have to just say a wizard did it and just completely ignore all of the terrifying implications, or at the beginning of the campaign you have to say like, okay, house rule in this universe, things that modify your stats, like that has some kind of permanent effect on you, right? If your stats go up or down, right, and they're permanently or temporarily changed for like in a long time, because like I'm thinking like a potion of like bull strength, right? That is like raw, but then the high is kind of gone quickly. But if you spend a day as a gold dragon, like you're gonna you're going to think differently than before the time you spent a day as a gold dragon, right? It's like every time you cast polymorph, it's like an early 2000s Zach Braff movie. Like, this is the montage of the weekend that changed my life, right?
Yeah.
So I think like that would actually be a super interesting thing to say, like, okay, magic is not like this universal good. Like, it has these lasting effects on a person, right? Which I wonder how much you are thinking about that because of the aforementioned cyber psychos.
Yeah, no, because it was funny because Megan mentioned it because she's watching Critical Role, and she said, "Oh, it's funny because the barbarian, when he's turned into wild shaped into like a great hawk or something like that, his intelligence goes from a 6 to an 8, so he gets slightly smarter." I'm like, that's not how that spell works. And because I was like, polymorph doesn't replace your mental abilities. And she's like, I think it does. I looked up, I'm like, oh my God. And I think to your point, though, is that like, I think that part of the issue too is that, you know, so when you take a potion of strength, right, that increases your strength by whatever, right? So I don't, and for a short period of time, but I don't think that to your point, like, I think that would like feel good, but I think the corollary would be more so like taking somebody who had a strength of 6 because they had never been strong their entire life and then beefing them out to an 18, you know, like that would also have a profound impact on somebody. Like, you know, I now know what it feels like. If nothing else, it may make you like suddenly be like, all of these people who bullied me, and all of a sudden you're like super strong. You're like, I mean, I still think it's wrong, but I can empathize with them a little bit more, you know, like, you know, so I think there's that. Another possibility could be, so I do like the idea of, you know, no, if you polymorph yourself and your stats are way off, I will expect for you to reconcile that, you know, like how do you deal with that now? I've actually got one player in one of my campaigns that he had some really, really awesome weapons in his last campaign because he said, I want those weapons again. And he's playing the nephew of the person that he was in the last campaign. He goes, I want those weapons again. And I said, give me a list. And he goes, I am going to build my character around wanting to get those weapons. Like, I know that guy, you know, and I want, and like, so that kind of makes sense. And so I feel that, you know, like you said, going into it, you'd have to say, these are my expectations. If it's a small delta, you know, you can probably handle it. But yeah, if you go from an below average intelligence to well above average intelligence, then yeah, you can reconcile that. Or alternatively, I also kind of like the idea of the minute that the spell is cast, right? You are aware of the spell being cast, and you know, like you do your whole thing. But it's a flashpoint. You black out before and you black out after, you know? So like you still behave as you would, as the character would as a gold dragon, but you don't remember any of it, you know? Because, and especially for like the personality, the mental stats, right? The intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Intelligence and wisdom in particular, I think makes tons of sense because it's like your brain can't handle what you were now, you know, like your brain went from being an intelligence 20 to intelligence of 8. The intelligence of 8 mind can't wrap their mind around what the intelligence of 20 was. So it is actually a true Flowers for Algernon, right, where you can't remember what it was. But anyways, yeah, when I saw that, I was like, no, this is, I think as they just made the change because they were like, oh, well, we need polymorph. If somebody's like charisma based, they need to be able to get something out of that spell. I think that the change was made for a mechanical reason. And I immediately went into the narrative like cesspool of like, this changes everything.
Well, I think D&D defaults to, like, thematically defaults to heroes being heroes, right? So anytime something like that comes up, I would say D&D as a system and as a like theming culture, that's almost probably never the intention, because if it is, they would explicitly state, here is the negative impact of this thing or of doing this. So if there isn't a negative impact openly stated, I think the assumption in the D&D universe is there's only upside, right? Because it's heroes being heroes. But I do think there's a lot of interesting opportunity for costs of things, and a way less horrifying example of that they did change in 5.0 is you can't buy and sell powerful magic items easily, and they explicitly state here are the mechanical reasons, and here's like kind of how that changes the world a little bit, right? Like the whole world functions a little bit differently because you can't go down to the corner longsword +2 mart and wait for the blue light special to pick up several spare longsword +2s, right? Like there has to be a narrative reason that this incredibly powerful item exists in the world, and you can't just say, well, I want to convert this into gold because this item is now separate from the economy, right? The economy is for like housing and food and clothing, and this is like an artifact. So I like that kind of thing. And I don't know, I'm sure in game design there's like, it's like, oh, that's a flargon. Like you build flargons into the game to prevent or deter behaviors you don't want, or to create narrative opportunities you do want, or something. I think another interesting flargon, I don't know why this discussion made me think of this, but I think another interesting like rules flargon that would have ramifications on like how the world functions is magical travel painful or like terrible in some way, right? And in the Harry Potter universe, J.K. Rowling sucks. In the Harry Potter universe, they at first they describe like how uncomfortable apparating is, and it's like, oh wow, so people probably don't like apparate willy-nilly because it's like it's incredibly effective, but like there's a cost. And it's like, oh no, we're never going to talk about that again. It's now characters are just wherever I need them to be, and it's like, oh okay. But imagine if like every time you did, Misty Step or Dimension Door or something, it's like it was painful, or it cost you something that you didn't have an unlimited amount of, right? Like you lose a finger or something, like something to do that, because then like you get to we're in the woods and nobody has self-service situation, right? Where it's like, I don't have to worry about them using this all-purpose travel solution to solve problems of distance or problems of communication, because this all-purpose travel solution has been neutered, right?
One of my favorite versions of that, because this is all related to gaming. One of my favorite versions of that.
We're talking about game design. This is totally related to gaming.
Yeah, no, I was saying like this is all. I'm okay going down this rabbit hole because this is all related to gaming. Is that I really enjoyed doing was the one in your adventure where I was playing so for everyone else, I was playing an artificer. And what it says for artificer is you cast spells through your tools, right? And so,
yes.
And so one of the things I said was one of the spells I took was Cure Light Wounds, and my character was completely did not understand people, loved people, but did not understand them at all, right? And so she treated people like she treated machines, and so she would cast Cure Light Wounds or Cure Wounds, and whenever she would cast Cure Wounds, she did it by soldering people's wounds together, right? And so what I made clear to all the other players is I'm like, this will heal you. It is just blindingly painful when I'm doing it, right? And that's all it was. Like it had no other mechanical drawback, all healing. But I was like, but it is very painful. And that was a lot of fun because people actively avoided me healing them.
Yes.
It was a last resort. You'd burn through all of your hit dice on short rests. They would quaff potions, and potions don't regenerate before they let me heal them, because like I think I only healed one person. It was because they were unconscious, or something like that. Yeah,
because they basically couldn't protest.
Right, yeah. And I was like, don't worry, I've got this. And then they woke up to, oh, God, why? So stuff like that, I think, makes it way more interesting because as opposed to, hey, I'm just always going to pull the lever that gives me the infinite candy. It's like, yeah, but what if when you pulled it, you got an electric shock, like that. I think that sort of stuff makes for more interesting storytelling and more interesting decisions, as opposed to just the, oh, well, I'm going to walk into the room and cast fireball. It's like, yeah, but what if every time you cast fireball, like it burns your own flesh, And then that's not going to be, you're not going to be the fireball all the time kind of guy,
Yeah, I do. Something I think you derive more enjoyment out of playing in like a negative space, and I mean negative in like an objective, like
suboptimally.
Yeah. Than I do typically, because what I have seen in like some really extreme cases, and I can't think of a time you've ever done this, but like you could imagine the kind of person that would say like, oh, I'm going to essentially create so many of those flargons that like nobody ever gets to feel heroic. Nobody ever gets to like have fun. And it's like, then you probably don't want to play D&D. If everything is like a trade-off between starvation and cannibalism, then that D&D is not well set up for that, because the whole universe is like, you're a hero, and heroes usually don't starve to death or resort to cannibalism, right? So like if an adventure is crafted in a way where it like forces that kind of thinking, like I usually prefer to consume that, right? Like I enjoy watching apocalyptic fiction or reading a book or something like that more than I like saying like, oh, well, how would I decide between, letting my child starve to death or, tricking them into cannibalism because they can't know what I'm making them eat. Like that's just less, I don't know. Real life is so depressing. Most of the time I'm like, no, if I'm going to be pretending, I want to like pretend good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's kind of one of the big things. One of the things that is very interesting with D&D in particular, or with TTRPGs, but in my personal experience with D&D is that the game can kind of be kludged to do anything. I remember one time I was playing a horror adventure, a Vile campaign with somebody where it was actually more of like a systems management, a resource management game, where so they would go do a thing, but I was like, okay, now this organization is under your control. You have this many people in your army. Okay, well, I want to go send the army off to go do this. It's like, okay, we're going to need to conscript more people. Now, here is an adventure that you can do that would raise your accolades so more people will join your thing. So we definitely still adventured and stuff, but there was way more of that resource management. But again, also too, in that particular one is we start off, I'm like, this is a horror adventure. We're all in agreement that this is horror. You guys are the villains, So that was the agreement going into it. And I think that you're right in the sense that I think that there's some needle threading, and I think that we are kind of, if either one of us is to err, you're going to err on one side, I'm going to err on the other, right? Like, but there is a needle to be threaded, because I think that if you play suboptimally all of the time, right, then it's just like, all right, well, kind of nothing gets done, right?
So if you're bad at everything, why are you here?
Yeah, exactly. Right. If it's just like if it's like, oh, well, when I cast cure, it hurts people, but it still heals them, but it hurts. And it's like, when I cast this spell, this terrible thing happens. When I do this terrible thing happens. It's like, all right, so just kind of terrible things happen all of the time. And then that's no good. But I think though, if it swings too far in the other direction, it's just like the, John Hero walked into the bar. He's a strong man who's also super intelligent and sly and charismatic, and women fall all over him. And it's just like so if you're good at everything, then it's like, okay, well, this character never. Oh, you know what it is? It's the Mayor Dewey's play in Steven Universe.
Yeah,
where it's just like, he's not flawed. There's no struggle here, right? So I think that those are the two extremes. And yeah, it's about like threading that needle of like, well, they can't be good at everything, but they can't be bad at everything, and so, and I think that every player has a tendency to drift in one direction. I think that that's what makes TTRPGs and in particular D&D so nice, is that collaborative storytelling, because then you can say like, hey, pull it back, so you hopefully hit like a median that then drives the gameplay,
Well, and I think the expectation setting of like, we are using the D&D framework to tell a survival horror story. So success doesn't mean saving everyone and curing the zombie disease and then the world is all rainbows, right? Like that's not what success in this story will mean, right? Because if you go into either extreme with the opposite expectation, it is basically impossible to have a good time. And because D&D naturally leans heroic, those people are the ones more likely to get caught off guard, right? Where it's like,
yes,
oh crap, did you miss session 0? This is actually, sorry, this is actually a survival horror campaign. You are going to have a very bad time because you thought you were like Legolas, and this is not a world of Legolas and Aragorn. They're all dead. The age of man is over.
Yeah, this is not Legolas and Aragorn. This is Joel and Ellie. Like, yeah. It's going to go a little bit differently for you, Yeah.
I did hear just as kind of like an extreme example of like in the other direction of like the opposite of like, hey, guys, we're going to do the survival horror thing, is the way this, I can't remember what she's from, but she's a Critical Role style, like public, well-known DM. And she said for the end of her campaign, she had characters that had gotten to like above average levels. So they were like, 12 to 15, like that range, like where you're getting pretty powerful. But narratively, like the characters all felt like they had kind of wrapped their stuff up. So they were kind of ready to move on from those characters. And so she said, I wanted to have this big final heroic battle, but I wanted it to be hard. So what I did was just like, we all kind of dropped the role play for a minute. And I told the characters, here is what you get to do. You're at the royal banquet and, you've been eating and celebrating, and the bad guy, right? Like this fallen angel, basically, this super powerful bad guy is going to come and crash in. Like that is what's going to happen this adventure. However, unbeknownst to you, the food you have been eating is enchanted. So all of you have access to all of your class abilities. So it is as though like every time you had to make a choice about like, do you want to raise like strength or dexterity? Like you get to raise both, right? So essentially all of your stats are like buffed by 5, right? You have these additional feats. Anytime it said like, oh, you have to choose between this class ability and this class ability, you just have both. So like you are the most paragon version of yourself that you could possibly be for 1 hour. So you have 1 hour to resolve this problem using these powers. And if you can't using these powers, there's no way you'll be able to do it after, right? And so that led to them suddenly having to think in really complicated ways about like how I've basically been told you can't break the rules, but you can push them to their breaking point. So how are you going to combine like my weird class feat with your weird class feat that a second ago we didn't even have access to, that we now need to understand and figure out how to like min-max them in the moment, like in situ, after this angel has like smashed through the ceiling and we have to deal with this. And it was one of those things that playing with min-maxers all the time is typically not great, right? If everyone at the table is a min-maxer and that's what you want to do, then like you do you. But generally, that's not what people go to TTRPGs for, because it's hard for everyone to have an equally balanced min-maxing time. So that this DM like found a way to say, we're going to take this thing that if we did it too much, it wouldn't be fun. And we're going to do it real hard right now. And then we're done.
Right. And I think that can be fun. I think that the thing I remember I spoke with somebody a while back is long story short, they had min-maxed their items to the point where they were completely broken, And the thing is that they were a veteran player and there were a bunch of other new players, and the other new players had not min-maxed their items to the point of being broken, right? So
this is almost always the problem, is that the min-maxer is the min-maxer.
Right. And so then they were making it so, like person 1 was dealing 20 damage, person 2 was dealing 23 damage, and they were dealing like 80, So it's like, okay, well, nothing that anyone else does matters, right? And so basically, as I said, okay, event happens. Everybody loses all of their magical items. And then the min-maxer was very upset, and everybody else was like, all right, it was a good narrative, a good story, because basically it was like they had become very powerful. That was the end of Act 2. At the beginning of Act 3, Vecna, showed up, and this was before Vecna was cool, but Vecna showed up. And stripped them of all of their items and banished them to another plane of existence, And the reasoning behind why he didn't just kill them is because gods aren't allowed to kill humans; they're just allowed to like meddle in their affairs. So it's like, I didn't kill you; the Grey Wastes of Hades did. I just made it so it was really likely that you died there.
It's at the end of like Batman Begins.
Like, I
don't have to save you either.
Yeah, that kind of thing. But then the min-maxer said, how in the world are we ever going to survive if we don't have at level 12 with no magical items? And I said, that if you deal 10 damage per round, right? Then the bad guy's going to have 100 hit points. And if you deal 100 damage per round, they're going to have 1,000 hit points. It's about, each encounter is about modulating the encounter and the feelings behind it. The amount of damage that you do and the ways that you can engage with it change, but like, ultimately, for me as the DM, part of my job is to make you feel powerful when you're supposed to feel powerful, make you feel weak when you're supposed to feel weak, and keeping in mind the fact that you have control over the situation as well, right? So and so if it's like I walk up to them and I use all of my abilities and smite them, and it's like, and your sword hums as it pings off of their armor, it's like, oh no, like that's not the feeling, but then that's the feeling that you're going for, right? And then also you want the character to be like, I've built this good character and here's all of the stuff that they can do. And so then they know, like, I gave that one about 20%, or I gave that one 90%, and this was the result. Anyways, I say all that to say that, I think that a lot of the times newer players get so in the weeds with, I want to be able to do all of the things. And what I find, to your point, is helpful is sometimes it's like, all right, you know what we're going to do? We're going to build level 20 characters. Everyone's going to be level 20. Everybody, you're going to have a legendary, 3 very rares, and as many rare magical items as you want. As much as your piggly little face can just shove into it, like take them all, do whatever you want, right? Okay, is everybody really happy? All right, here is the god Tiamat. Good, you beat him in 2 rounds. Are we done? Did we do
get
it?
that out of your system?
Okay, good. Now let's go tell a story,
Well, that's why I think I wish I could remember her name, because I'd link to the thread where she explained it. But I think that was like an ideal case, probably hard to replicate, like intentionally try and copy someone's good day, right? But because she did it with established characters as the very last combat encounter, not even the last entire adventure, but just the final combat encounter at the end of a campaign that had already passed its resolution. And this is like the epilogue, essentially. And it's like, oh, okay, there are stakes here, because if they can't figure it out, the problem of the campaign was resolved, but maybe all the characters die in the epilogue, right? So like there are still stakes, but if they win, what a story, right? Like what bards will write tales about this utterly insane like group of demigods fighting a god, right? And like that would be, both of those would feel narratively realistic, even though mechanically you're just like, we're gonna use some really big numbers that normally would not be fun, but maybe with these guardrails in this very specific situation we can make the big numbers also interesting in a way that, to your point, normally it's just like bigger numbers are just bigger numbers,
right? And no, and I agree, and I think it can absolutely be fun, but it's been my experience a lot of times, like what you have is players who are kind of searching for that particular high all of the time, and they don't really realize that they're doing it. It's like you are ruining this very, very nice steak dinner that we're eating because you just keep talking about how you'd rather be doing heroin, and it's like, and that's fine, if you can do heroin the one time, right? Which I think heroin is renowned for being able to be done just the once, right? But it's yeah. So if it's like, hey man, we all just want to sit down for a steak dinner, we don't want to do that thing, So like I said, like I remember for me personally on my journey, right, is that when I was 18, Deities and Demigods came out for 3.5, and I said, we're going to make gods. And I sat down with Bucknell and I think like one other person, and we made god characters, and we went around and smashed things. I was like, okay, I think I'm good, but I really enjoy that though, because then even now with video games, I will get really into like, I got to level this character up because I got to level him up so that way I can be super powerful. And it kind of puts you in that Skinner box modality, right? That's what I like about D&D, where it's just like, I can make a character exactly as, if I want to see how these 2 or 3 feats play together, I don't have to put 20 hours into the game so I can unlock it all, so I can see how it all interplays. I can literally say, how much damage can I do if I link A to B to C to D? A game-breaking amount of damage. That was fun. And it took the 20 minutes for me to eat that candy. Now I can move on to the next thing, you know?
Math puzzle complete.
So do you want to talk about your short games topic? We got way off on D&D, but I thought it was a good discussion.
Well, ironically, we will put a short amount of time into short games.
There you go.
But so I've been very on this like Final Fantasy 14 has like consumed my gaming life, and so that a reduction in total time I'm committing to other games. Still playing Tetris though.
Nice.
And kind of the realization that like, oh, you and I go to short games probably in the same kind of different way we go to games of any size, right? Which is, we both like narrative experiences, but for you, a lot of gaming is the game part, right? Which like
Yeah.
makes sense, right? Dead Cells would not be fun if there wasn't the challenge of execution, right? Celeste would not be fun if there wasn't the challenge of execution. And I enjoy those experiences, but definitely less than you, right? Whereas I don't think you really enjoy some of the experiences. I'm like, this is a video game, and you're like, this is a book with pictures, right? Which I think might like kind of, like physics is different at the macro scale versus the micro scale. I wonder if there's any opportunity for that difference in game size, right? So like a game like A Short Hike is an absolute gut punch in the narrative. It's not hard. Like if you sit down and you decide I'm going to play A Short Hike, like you'll finish it. If you sit down and you say I'm going to play Journey, like you'll finish it, right? Like if you have even basic games literacy, you will probably come out the other end. Bon, which I think might still be PC only. I can't remember. I played it on PC. It's not expensive. It might even be free. But it's actually I don't want to spoil it. It's a horror game, but it's about an incredibly sad and human topic. But game only takes like an hour, and thank God it does, because you would not want to deal with that subject matter for 40 hours. Like if you took this story or the subject matter it's dealing with and you stretched out to 40 hours, it would make you kill yourself. Like it would be so depressing. But to engage with like a scary topic or like a super bubblegum happy topic, right? Things that like in quantity become overwhelming, good or bad, because, too much of a good thing and all that. I think these like super short games can give you places to play where that's less of a threat. But when most people, I think, especially nowadays with the kind of resurgence of roguelites and like every friggin' indie game is a roguelite now or has roguelite elements, that they say like, oh, it's a short game, you can play for 20 minutes. And it's like, no, a round is 20 minutes. The game is 1,000 hours, but you just play it in 20-minute chunks. Whereas a game like Franken is 45 minutes and there is zero reason to ever play it a second time, right? The one who pulls the sword will be crowned king. That game is like 15 minutes and you basically have zero reason to ever play it again. Untitled Goose Game, zero Journey, right? Like, could you get joy out of rereading a favorite book? Absolutely you could, right? But there's not a ton to see on the second pass, right? So it's just, do I want to feel those feelings again? And does this game even lend itself to generating those feelings a second time? Sometimes they don't, right? It's the punch the first time is where all the energy is spent. Do you think like these kinds of short games have any appeal for you, or are you just like, why would I do that?
So two things. One is I'll answer that question, and the other question we need to address is the pricing, because you mentioned that in the thing, whether or not they're worth full price. So yeah, absolutely. I think that I don't think for game length is the issue for me. I think where I get particularly hung up, and I think that I know this is going to maybe sound pretentious. I don't mean it to, but it's kind of like bad kerning, where once you kind of see it, you're like, which is that I get hung up on games that I think would be better in other media, or if they're like where it's like, this game shouldn't be a game, it should be a movie, like I don't like what you're doing is making me do stuff that I don't like doing in order to get to the next cutscene, which I do care about, so like, then in that case, I'm like, well, then I'll just queue it up on YouTube and I'll watch the thing, right? Or if it's, and then I'm worried, I'm like, well, am I losing something because it's not happening to me? It's something that I'm just viewing, right? So that's kind of why Journey, for example, love Journey, absolutely love it. But the thing with Journey is that it's critical that it is a game, right? That would not be a good movie, right? And one of the best things I remember learning about Journey is it's supposed to be the hero's journey, right? Yes, it does what it says on the tin. But to me, the most important thing about it, right, is that like one of the things that was said is that one of the things of the hero's journey is the refusal of the call. And a lot of people have said that that's not in there. And to be fair, to be a hero's journey, it doesn't have to have every single step. It just has to have most of them. But is that they're like, oh, well, the refusal of the call isn't in there because there's this part, but there's no refusal of the call. And it's like, there is. Because as a game player, 95% of the time, what you're eventually going to do is it says like it guides you in a direction and you're going to wander off in another direction. And that's the refusal of the call. So in order for the game to tell the story properly, it relies on the player as part of the art, you know? And so when I don't feel that it's doing that, where it's like, I don't really need to be here, you know, like then my tolerance just plummets, especially if it's, you know, like whatever the game part of the game is not fun for me. Then I'm like, I'll take it back. Not, it's not fun, not enjoyable, right? You know, because it can be, you know, if it's supposed to, like Celeste isn't always enjoyable. Sometimes it's teeth grindingly frustrating,
right.
But it's supposed to be, it's mindful. So I think that that's the difference. It's not necessarily the length of time. It's just that if the main draw to it is narrative and all the gameplay is like, nah, then I'm like, okay, cool. Let me know when the novelization comes out.
Yeah. And I do think this is a space that is a little complicated because a lot of shorter games are indie games and a lot of indie games are not always firing on all cylinders like you would expect from something from a studio. And I don't mean AAA games, right? Like God of War, Medal of Halo, Honor, whatever, like Battlefield 2090, like that is its own whole thing, right? Those are summer blockbusters, and summer blockbusters can be great, but they're not automatically good just because they had a lot of money spent on them and a lot of people worked on them. The reverse is also true, that a small game made by an individual on a low budget is not automatically bad. It is harder for them to be successful when they are so resource constrained, right? So there's
sometimes those resource constraints can actually make for very, very good things, you know?
Absolutely.
Like, Baba Is You, I thought, was an amazing game, and it was very, very low resource, you know? But like the idea of you can change the rules by moving the tiles around, I was like, that's an interesting concept, you know?
Right. And that's why like indie games are often darlings, because we love a success story, right? And like lone coder in their basement wrote all the music, designed all the puzzles, made all the art, you know, did all the marketing, invented computers, and then invented the arcade, and now we have this game. Like we love a story like that. And a story like that definitionally cannot come out of a multi-billion-dollar studio. So like there's infinite indie games. There's million, billion, trillion indie games, but like the ones we elevate to honor status are usually the ones that also fit that narrative of like the lone genius and the small, you know, group of ragtag, you know, high schoolers or college students in the garage. But you are going to also, just like a lot of summer blockbusters, after you see them, you forget them forever. There are a lot of indie games that are like frustrating because it's like, oh, they didn't design this part well because they couldn't, right? They didn't have the experience. They didn't have the resources. They were alone. They didn't have a second person checking their work or queuing it or whatever. So like some problems make it to a final game in the indie space that you typically wouldn't see in the blockbuster space, right? It's just a different kind of problem. Not that one is always right and the other is always wrong.
So one thing that, and this is definitely going to wax a little philosophical, but and I do have another thing on the which genre is it in, but that may be worth saying is that I think that the way I kind of approach gaming in particular is I am exchanging time, right? So I'm giving up time, and then the question is, what did I get for it, right? And so if I got entertainment, I got just joy, right? Like from playing Dead Cells. Like I spent 3 hours playing Dead Cells. I gave the game 3 hours. It gave me back 3 hours worth of joy, right? Then I'm happy with that exchange, right? Also, there can be games like The Last of Us where it's like, not only did I get, you know, the joy of playing it, but it made me think about the world in a different way. Or like Journey, that also kind of caused me to kind of think like, oh, wow, this is interesting. You know, like the way that they told this story with no words whatsoever. And the fact that literally you then go back and help other people along with their journey. You know, you return to, I'm like, that was changed the way I thought about it. So in a way, that's like a bonus. You know, I get more money. And I'm fine with like being like, well, I didn't really enjoy that, but it did have a lasting impact on me, right? But if it's like I gave 3 hours to it and I got back mild frustration, then that was not I'm not happy with that exchange, right?
Yeah. I think that's a completely legitimate way to do that calculus. And I had a similar thought because a lot of the games that people recommended, because there's, I don't know, two dozen or so in here, and a lot of them are in like the 3, 4, 5 hour range. And I was like, yeah, that's short-ish, but that's like medium, right? A Zelda is like 8 or 9 hours, right? So 4 or 5 hours is like, that's still a decent amount of time. I was like, I want stuff that's like under 2 hours, under an hour maybe, right? And those are the ones that I was like, if this just makes you feel or think anything, then you probably got your time's worth because you didn't put that much time in.
Well, and also too, like I think with lists like that, what the mental calculus that I think is being done is that you're gambling, right?
Totally.
So the question is, how much money time are you willing to gamble, right? And so the thing is, if it's like, 45 minutes, it would just be like if you walked up to the craps table, you threw $1 down and somebody rolled and they were like snake eyes and took your money, you'd be like, man, But if you went up there and you're like, I didn't really get much joy out of that, but it was $1. Who cares, right? If you go up there and you put $500 down, and they're like snake eyes, and they take all your money. You're like, well, that was not $500 worth of fun.
Yeah. I did not enjoy that anticipation $500 worth.
So the one thing I was going to say about the different genres is I think then, and again, like, is it fair to compare things to this? No, but I'm gonna. Like The Last of Us, that IP has so much thought put into it that I think that it like kind of sets the bar, especially now for me because the TV show has come out, right? And they have made changes between the TV show and the game, and the changes they have made are so unbelievably thoughtful that it's like this is how you do it, because they said, hey, here's an amazing video game that tells this amazing story. Now we're going to switch mediums, and so you know what we did? Changed a whole bunch of stuff. You're still having the same feelings. We're still telling the same story. But like, for example, there are whole scenes where like, literally you fight bad guys that don't even show up. And it's like, why? Because in a video game, you'd be bored out of your skull if they forced you to sit through all of this and just watch a movie, right? So they had to break it up with some like combat. Now, during the combat in the game, they characterize Joel, they characterize Ellie. Like, it's character development, because when Joel snaps somebody's neck and Ellie goes, Jesus Christ, Joel, right? Like, that's it's character building. So they're doing heavy lifting there from a narrative standpoint. But in the TV show, they cut all that crap out because, like, it's not, it doesn't make really sense for Joel to be that superhero, So like, okay, so he's not a superhero in this one. He's still Joel, but he can't take down 20 men, I say all that to say that, that's the type of consideration that I expect from all video games every time, right? But like, is the idea of it's like, is this the right medium to be telling this in? So I just wanted to kind of draw that link to say, like, it can be done. Not everything's Mortal Kombat 2. Sometimes you get a Last of Us, the TV series. Yeah, no, and I think there's extremes, but most things are going to fall into the, do I think this is the right medium for this, right? So, like we played Ace Attorney, right? Which is a visual novel that is very gameplay elements light, right? You could watch someone else play that and get a fair amount of the enjoyment out of it, because a lot of the enjoyment is humor, the way the characters interact, right? Which you have virtually no say in, right? Like, that's all scripted because it's a book that you advance by pressing certain buttons at certain times. And there is gameplay. There are some puzzles and stuff to it, but it's a visual novel. Like, that is the genre of video game. And not everybody thinks a visual novel is worth playing at all. Not everybody thinks a visual novel is worth putting, say maybe more than a couple of hours into. They're like, yeah, I'll sit there and press the space bar on my keyboard to advance the visual novel for 30 minutes for a good story, but I don't consider that like playing a video game, right? Whereas I fell so like head over heels with the Ace Attorney characters that by the time we recorded the episode, I had almost completed the trilogy, right? So it's like, that was the right decision for me. That probably wouldn't have been for you or for a different player. And I know a lot of the games on this list are, especially the horror games, like they are puzzly, story-y games, but some games are doing that because they want you to be
deeply present when the scary thing happens, and making you press buttons is a way to do that, right? Some of them are doing the end of The Last of Us, right? Where it's, no, you have to shoot this doctor. You have to choose to carry Ellie out of here. If we just showed you this in a cutscene, it wouldn't be incredibly dramatic. You, the player, have to doom humanity because you think Ellie's more important, right? So like,
and she is.
And she is. She doesn't think so, but that's not for her to decide. She's a kid.
No, that's for me, Joel, her father, to decide.
Right. But like Franken is, you can't lose Franken, right? So it literally says in the description, it has the simplest combat system ever made. Because the point is, hey, look at all these funny references about these classic games that we love, right? And that was really fun for 45 minutes. But 75 minutes of that would have been less fun. 90 minutes would have been bordering on unfun, and longer than that would have been unplayable, because it's not
so
really,
you like donuts, eh?
right? Because it's not really a game. It's kind of like a shared joke where you press buttons to make the joke happen. And I assume some of these kind of fall into that bag. There's several in here, especially the ones that are at the, like, once you get over the 2-3 hours, like Inside, A Short Hike, right? Like those are more like video games. Like you do a lot of playing, and the story is either delivered in the world building or through player actions or stuff. So there's like more video game and it's less visual novelty. But there's a million more that could have been on a list like this. So this was just, awesome that community people shared all these. But I didn't get anyone when I asked for this, and this is an anecdote, right? This is not representative, but I didn't get anybody who was like, well, but what's wrong with short games that are just roguelites that endlessly loop, right? Like the request of, I want things that are like little short narrative packages, yielded no resistance, which I was kind of happy about, if I'm honest, because I was afraid
communication was happening.
Well, and I was afraid that like real gamers were going to have things to say about the meal I was trying to order, right? Like, why would you come to a steakhouse and order fish? Because I want fish. Like, I don't care what the restaurant thinks I should be ordering. I want fish. It's like, oh, well, you should be ordering a steak. It's like, no, I want steak sometimes. I love Dead Cells, right? I loved when we played Gungeon. Like, Vampire Survivors held my interest for 2 very intense days, and then I never thought about it again. Like, those kinds of, they're basically arcade score chasers, right? Like, that's what a lot of modern roguelites are, categorically anyway. But I don't always want that, right? Sometimes I want this other thing. I'm tempted to offer you a challenge. If I pick a game off here, will you play it if it's less than a certain amount of time?
Yeah, I think I can do that. And so 1, challenge accepted, and 2, we've gotten like a big deep dive on 2 different things, and now we've got this huge other dive to do. So to answer your question of our short games you'll probably never play again, still be worth full price. Yes.
The curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black, and you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone, there's no player 2 there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creep in with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day.